In this episode, we look at how real-life events have impacted screenplays and how writers have tried different methods to handle these events.
We also look at Season 5 of BoJack Horseman and Disenchanted and discuss why sometimes first and second impressions differ. Judgecast!
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Judgecast with me, Joe Bowden, and this guy...
Jay Taylor.
It's like you're a kind of sound effects machine. Like you're not really here at the beginning of the episode, like you're still sitting down and getting settled. Because it's like almost like I'm hitting a button and one goes Judgecast and one that goes Jay Taylor, and I've got like some kind of sound manipulator to make it different each time.
Okay, so...
Prove you're real.
Thanks. So I'm just a tool for you to...
no, it's just because like...
turn on whenever you need.
Because you just say these like really short snippets right at the beginning. It just occurred to me. It's quite funny.
Oh, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Am I like the...
I really want to have a button there.
Who was the guy from
George
Police Academy?
George Cars.
Michael, the guy who did the...
You are so much like him.
I would love to be him.
Yeah. Or are you more of a Bobcat Goldthwait? Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels
well,
right.
I like to feel like my Jay Taylors definitely have a unique flair each week.
That's nice.
So a bit like the couch gag in The Simpsons. So that there's a...
You're the couch gag.
I'm the couch gag. There's a kind of
God.
flair to each one. It's a bit unique.
Do you know what? If we'd scripted this, it couldn't have gone better.
It couldn't,
because the first thing we were going to talk about was the new Matt Groening show.
Segue.
Oh my!
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
You wanted me enthused at the beginning, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I can get enthused about that show. I really, really, really wanted to be. It's a new Matt Groening show.
Yeah.
It's on Netflix, so it's like all available. It's animated sitcom. It's got
Abby
Jacobson in it.
I love her.
Is it Abby Jacobson?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's got a lot of pedigree,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm hoping it gets better. But at the moment, I'm just not vibing it.
I mean, I think, to be honest, I feel like I'm not going to be the only person who uses this phrase. I'm disenchanted by disenchantment.
Oh.
Or is it what is the name of this show?
Disenchant. Disenchanted.
Whatever it is, I'm disenchanted with it.
Yeah.
However, I feel like I need like a little bit of time with it. So
I want to keep going.
Like, did I love Simpsons immediately? I don't remember because I was 7 when I started watching it.
You know how our nephew and quite a few other young children we know have this, I love Spider-Man, I love Spider-Man, I love this. And then you find out they've never seen the Spider-Man TV show, comic, film. They just love it. And I feel like that was me with Simpsons on my 7th birthday. I had the pants, the doll, the shoes.
You wouldn't have seen it. It wasn't on terrestrial television.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just loved it by proxy almost.
Yeah.
And now I do. I think it is a fantastic show in certain points. The one for me was Futurama.
Yeah.
As we talked about.
And I think I did like Futurama almost immediately. But I'm wondering if it just hit me at the right time, because it was all about future and I was really into like science fiction and stuff like that. But yeah, this one, it's just not grabbing me, but I feel like maybe if I come back to it in 6 months, I'll have got used to seeing the characters. Because in a way, there's part of it, it's just like the characters just aren't really vibing with me.
Yeah, there's not that kind of core group.
Yeah, like it's got Matt Groening all over it.
Yeah.
Like, I should love this. I just don't.
I think the brilliant thing of Futurama was you were Fry being introduced to this sci-fi world where anything could happen. Mm-hmm. And then after like the 2nd or 3rd episode, they went, yeah, fuck it, now you're in, we can go anywhere we want, we'll do anything we want. But they had that conduit. This doesn't really have that. It's kind of... And the fantasy world feels like it's been done to death. In like satire and stuff. You had Holy Grail, you've had countless kind of piss takes of everything on Saturday Night Live and other sketch shows. There's always that kind of taking the piss out of fantasy. And I feel like this is doing it in a nice way, but it hasn't landed in the way that I thought And there were like Monty Python jokes as well, like the whole bringing out the dead and stuff.
Oh, there was definitely a couple of jokes that have been made in Blackadder.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, oh, what? I've heard that one before. Yeah, and I mean,
which we know is.
I've always, for some reason, I have a real aversion to anything medieval.
Yeah.
It's my least favourite period in history, and I love history. But the aesthetic, everything about medievalness feels grimy and horrible. Yeah. I just don't like it at all. Which is why a lot of fantasy I don't get either, because it's just aesthetically I just can't quite.
But I think it would be ripe for satire right now. And, you know, we know that there are always jokes before you wrote a joke. You know, we in our most recent screenplay, we were watching something else and we suddenly went, oh, that's a joke we put in our screenplay, and we had no idea that it was a joke that was made.
No, absolutely.
You know, so I don't think that's necessarily.
I'm not saying it's stealing from Blackadder. It just didn't feel very fresh.
But I don't necessarily think that's the reason why we don't like this. There was just I didn't love it, and maybe that's the weird thing because it looks like Simpsons and Futurama. You know, everyone's got the Matt Groening kind of look, the overbite, the kind of because it kind of has that sensibility. I thought, wow, we're going to sit here and binge this. It hasn't grabbed us.
No, but interestingly, we did go back now that so this week, BoJack Horseman season 5 is it?
Yes,
has been released, and we tried that a few years ago now. We're like, it's okay, don't love it. We've gone back and revisited it and really enjoying it. So I think maybe this is, you know, Disenchantment's going to be a similar kind of situation of just letting that world kind of sit, let myself feel familiar with it, and then maybe come back and have another look.
And maybe it is preconceptions. Like with BoJack Horseman, we were expecting, maybe we were expecting something, and actually now realising that this is a really interesting, bold insight into mental health, addiction, you know,
BoJack,
BoJack, that we've gone back to it and kind of are now understanding it in a different way, whereas before, when we first started it, you know, we were coming off the back of like Family Guys and you know, that type of sitcom.
I think also
animated sitcom.
There was a point. There was almost an oversaturation of Will Arnett when that show first started, and I like Will Arnett. Don't get me wrong, but I was seeing him and hearing him everywhere, and it was a little bit confusing because I knew him as Batman in the Lego movies, and it was all these different things. And so it wasn't quite gelling for me. But yeah,
no, I've
had a little bit of distance now.
I'm really enjoying going back to it, and I think it's a really good thing to touch on because it is, you know, so many times there are shows out there that are either hyped up or, you know, and you go to them and you just don't love them, and then and I think it takes some kind of humility to go back and go, no, I'm actually going to give this show a go, give it another go, and sometimes it's really rewarding. Sometimes you go, no, there is a reason I do not like this show, and
I feel validated.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, but sometimes it is definitely worth a second look.
So I think that's a really key thing. And you know, what other shows are out there that we've tried and gone meh? You know, because there's a difference to like Sons of Anarchy, which we really tried.
Well, we really loved it first.
And we enjoyed it first, and then we suddenly realised, no, I'm not getting anything out of this show since
there was a massive quality dip.
Midway through season 2, and just didn't get anything from it. Whereas, and then there's a difference like Peaky Blinders, which we enjoyed the first season, but just had no push or desire to carry on. We just kind of we treated it almost as a one-shot
a little capsule
story
season,
of you know, okay, that's good, well done.
Well done. Well done. Could we be more
no, but I think it's
dismissive? Well done.
It's so interesting of viewing habits and like the shows that you binge, the shows that you kind of can just pick up as and when, the shows that you find and love in a different, and I just think it's important to make sure that you can go back to something and you don't write something off completely.
And also, your mindset and anything that's going on with you or what you're interested in at the time can have a massive impact on your first impressions of something. So yeah, it's worth trying again because minds change.
Yeah, we're really into mental health and addiction right now. So
Totally. We're addicted to addiction, but I'm disenchanted with disenchantment. Oh.
Wow.
I
feel
hate
like,
myself a bit.
Yeah, you
I
really...
feel as grimy as medieval times.
Yeah. Let's move on. Let's look at the adversary that is adversity. Yeah, so the adversity of real life.
Oh my, I mean that sounds a bit dramatic.
Okay, so
But
the adversity of real life.
I mean, it still sounds a bit dramatic.
Okay, sorry.
But that's okay.
Okay.
It's okay,
Sorry,
because adversity can...
I thought it was my delivery was the problem.
I like it,
Okay.
yeah. So what we wanted to talk about today was about the different things that can happen in a production that are extraneous necessarily to the story, real world events that can impact a story, and how different writers have been versatile to kind of write around those. And they're not necessarily adversity. Sometimes they're really lovely, good things.
Yeah, absolutely.
But sometimes they are also really horrible things. I'm being intentionally vague.
You are.
Yeah.
What sparked this, Joe?
Okay, so Star Wars 9 is now being made, and
Episode 9.
And we've talked a little bit before about, obviously, the sad death of Carrie Fisher, and how Episode 9 was going to be her episode. And obviously that's not going to happen now.
Well, no, and but this is the thing.
It could be about her absence.
It could be. Episode 7 definitely had a Han Solo focus.
Oh, it totally was.
Yeah, and then.
In a way, Harrison Ford forced their hand into that by saying, "This is my last episode.
Exactly.
I was the last one." So,
and then Episode 8, as much as Leia had some amazing moments, you felt that the core of that presence from the opening shot of Luke being handed the thing and throwing it was very much Luke's.
Oh, it was totally Luke's episode. Yeah.
And I'm producers have said that this was always meant to be. Carrie
Fisher, I don't know her, said herself that she was told by JJ that, was it JJ or somebody?
It was producers,
this was, going to be her one.
So it's how they go about, they could still make it very much a Princess Leia episode, but how they do that, and we know from production notes that they will be using scenes that she shot, whether that's for episode 7, for episode 8, we don't know, but there is footage of her, so how they're going to take that into the story,
that's going to be interesting.
Is what they've got going to change the direction of the story? So if they've got a scene of her talking to Rey, is that different to what they originally had?
Because the screenplay would not have been written by the time she died.
Exactly.
So that's what interests me so much, is this idea of the person who was essentially going to be the star of this particular film is no longer with us. So how they're going to work around that and still honour her role in this universe.
And honour... Yeah. That's the unique thing of this, is out of the entire of the original cast, there is something about Princess Leia and Carrie Fisher that they kind of became synonymous. Not to diminish her career, she did amazing things.
I think she definitely said stuff like that in her books. Yeah.
But as an actor and a writer, she did other amazing things. But there was something synonymous with her as this character, and so there's not just the death to deal with, but there's the huge impact on the entirety of Star Wars she had as well, that you've got to respect and pay tribute to, but then B, how do you do that whilst also carrying on this, have they completely retooled the story so it's now Lando's film? I don't know. I have no idea, and it's really... I just find it as a...
Well, yeah, that's what's so interesting here, is that there's so many different ways that screenwriters have dealt with situations like this before.
Yeah.
So whether that's the death of an actor or someone's pregnancy or lots of different things that can change things. As I say, some of them are really beautiful, optimistic things, and some of them are challenges that are born out of tragedy. Some writers have definitely seen it more as an opportunity to be inspired and to kind of think creatively. And in some cases it's been, let's just try and carry on as normal as possible. Which I don't think often works.
Yeah, I completely agree with you that carry on regardless. I don't think anyone really thinks that will work.
I think it depends on how high profile the franchise you're working on is, because if it's something that's in the news and everybody knows about...
Which Star Wars, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, Star Wars, stuff like that has to kind of be acknowledged in some way. So, I mean, this, for instance, and this is an entirely different type of change, but say, as an example, Kevin Spacey and House of Cards.
Ooh.
Big change there. No one wants Kevin Spacey right now. No one wants to be giving him work, understandably.
Or should be, yeah.
Or should be. Yeah, and so Netflix said, that's it, he's out.
Yep.
But he was the lead character of this show. And how they're dealing with that with the new season that starts, I believe, in November, is just literally dead. He's not in this season at all.
That's what we believe.
Well, yes, from what we've seen
teaser,
from the teaser and stuff, is dead in the ground, gone.
Done, yeah.
We're not shooting anything more with him. Now, of course, they may have shot a few scenes, but they might, even if they had, they maybe not have used them, because they seem to be very vehemently on the side of, we are not working with Kevin Spacey anymore.
We're not going to pay. Yeah, exactly.
So that's that. I mean, that was a really high-profile story.
Yeah.
Had to be acknowledged somehow.
Yeah.
They couldn't have just carried on.
No.
They couldn't just suddenly go, oh, he's not here, and just sweep out to the carpet.
I
they
feel
had
like
to be like, he's
it.
Dead. That's it. He's gone.
I feel like they've handled that well.
From what we've seen
so far.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting because that series didn't just revolve around him. The character was was such a conduit to the audience that he broke the fourth wall.
Yeah.
Spoke the only person in the show. Interestingly, until the last season.
Yeah.
Which
Robin
was
Wright
shot before all of this happened.
Yeah. Well, not before it happened, before it all came out.
Before it all came out.
Yeah.
And they somehow unwittingly already passed the torch to her, which is good because it shows that they were already on a progressive road.
In terms of the storytelling.
The characters, the fact that was already done, of the passing over the breaking the fourth wall torch, meant that we could just go into this with him dead. You didn't need to have any kind of Passover.
So say you're watching this show in like 30 years and you don't necessarily know what happened in the media at the time. Not in the media, but in the real world, at the time. You could carry on watching this, and from what it appears, what they have done, it won't look... It might be a little bit like, oh, that's weird, I was watching that and he's dead. But
then they did that with the first season.
You wouldn't necessarily tell that.
They did it with the first season.
Yeah, actually, we're used to sudden people leaving. Yeah, so, yeah... And that's something, to think about is these pieces of work, film, TV, or anything, don't just exist in the time in which they're released. They have to have a what's it called? They have to have an internal logic, so that if you're viewing them without all that outside information, the story can still work.
Yeah.
And translate.
Well, it's like the MCU's had to deal with that. We go into those films with so much knowledge, but I'm always amazed of, will they make sense? Would Infinity War make any sense if you just sat down on a Friday night and went, right, what's going on?
Yeah.
I mean, it should. For all intents and purposes, it should. I'd be interested to hear from someone who didn't. I was listening to something the other day where there's a Downton Abbey film coming out. And I've
never seen a scene.
I have no concept at all. I literally don't even know anything about it.
Maggie Smith is in it. That is the extent of my knowledge.
Yeah, I know a few actors that are in it, but I don't know anything about the cast, the characters, the story at all. So the idea of sitting down in the cinema and going, right, and having none of the 10-year backstory would be really interesting.
I mean, you could say that about Star Trek. Yeah. When that first went to film, you know, but then there's certain ththings become part of the collective consciousness. So even if you've never watched Star Wars, you know that Darth Vader is Luke's father. Yeah. You don't might necessarily know that Leia is his sister, but you do know that Darth Vader is Luke's father.
It's what comics do.
You do know that Scotty beams people up in Star Trek, and you know that Spock is an alien. You know, certain things.
But that's what comics have been doing so well for years. Of the reason they keep this internal logic, and you know, there's certain sayings like the only characters that are truly dead is like Uncle Ben, Gwen Stacy, and Batman's parents, because everyone else dies and comes back and blah blah blah. But they keep certain internal logics because there's like 90 years worth of most of, you know, of the DC characters. There's at least 60, 70 years worth of the Marvel characters. You can't keep up with that much continuity. I mean, some people do, but I can't. But I like to be able to pick up a new run sometimes and go, right.
I know that Spider-Man was bitten by a spider, a radioactive one.
Uncle Ben's dead.
His uncle died, and that's it.
Whatever else, I'll pick up the story. And so, I like that whole internal logic. I think that's a really key thing for Hollywood to be doing. But in terms of the real life impact, it's really... It's interesting to see how situations like that that are obstacles. You know, the death of a major star.
Are beautiful constraints. This is a sad tragedy.
It's a really sad tragedy that Kevin Spacey was able to get away for it for so long, that Carrie Fisher passed away at such a young age. You know, they are tragedies, but you know, there are other, like you talked about pregnancy earlier. There are times where it's not a tragedy. Either way, it's an obstacle. If you were on a path. If you're on a storytelling path, either way, it's an obstacle.
And there's a change from the real world, yeah.
It's being able to see whether it's a beautiful or a terrible obstacle. It's being able to see that as an opportunity to be creative and as an inspiration to take, you know, Claire Underwood's character and fucking run with it.
Yeah, and in a way that kind of...
It's inspiring.
And there's hopefully the idea, I think, is to have a little bit of catharsis from what's going on in the real world and seeing something happen on screens that's kind of some way of us all kind of helping to move forward from that without absolving anyone of any guilt.
Exactly. But it's so interesting because they're so different that there's almost no tribute to Frank Underwood, whereas
we need tribute to Carrie.
Fans will, if they don't pay tribute in some way, you know, it's why a lot of people felt that her dying in
The Last
Jedi would have been beautiful because it was a powerful. A lot of other people say it's amazing to finally see her using the Force powers and to have her chance to shine as a Jedi.
And that's an arc that's been seeded since episode 4. Sorry.
So I think it's really interesting to see that. But if they don't pay tribute I mean, I don't know how they can do it. It's such a weight of storytelling and real life passion.
Well, there's so many ways you could do it. They could do it just with one conversation that just sort of says Princess Leia, the universe rest her soul, or something like that.
Yeah, which would be a bit flippant.
It could be, or it could be that they make the whole story about her, and then there's a whole scale in between those things. But I mean, let's look at how other shows and films have. Well,
like you mentioned the pregnancy thing.
Yeah.
I feel like that's one of the key.
That's one of the most frequent ones. Yeah.
Because it's a natural part of life, and as with any job, it shouldn't impact however the parenting is being dealt with. It shouldn't impact their ability to maintain that job.
Exactly.
But obviously there is going to be an element of change physically for the woman and time constraints wise in terms of childcare and stuff. So I think it's really interesting.
I think on this level they can all afford carers.
Probably,
so,
but
but in terms of physical changes and let's just be clear here, not just women. It's not just women who could be pregnant.
No.
Yeah. for people who get pregnant. There is obviously a physical change, and also possibly in some cases some physical limitations as well, and stuff like that. So, for instance, Phoebe in Friends.
Yeah.
Now, she gave birth actually quite a bit earlier than... Lisa Kudrow gave birth quite a bit earlier than Phoebe did.
Yeah.
Luckily, right at the end of a season, so that she could have that summer to recover. But that's why she's pregnant with triplets, because she's actually a lot more pregnant in real life than she is in the show.
But they wrote the storyline because she was pregnant, didn't they? Yeah. So the whole thing,
her being the surrogate for her brother was
which was like a season
invented.
long.
Yeah, it was a pretty long arc. Yeah. Well, it was a 9-month long arc, I believe. You'll find.
No, it's really interesting. Like, so they obviously found out,
and it gave them some time to.
It gave time to
to weave that story in, and then a little bit into the season after that, she gave birth, but actually was wearing a pregnancy suit.
I feel like that one, it's interesting in its own way, but it wasn't kind of like she was on an arc. She was just living a life. So, in terms of the story, they could make her pregnant.
Yes.
And stuff like that.
That was a relatively straightforward way of dealing with it. The actor's pregnant.
They found
the character's pregnant.
They found out a unique way of having her pregnant rather than having to write a quick story of her getting together with someone and getting pregnant, or what could have been quite interesting of her having a pregnancy, a one-night stand pregnancy, like something like that, like more of the Roz kind of situation.
Yeah.
They went down a...
Roz from Frasier,
yeah. They went down a unique way of going, okay, she's going to, and...
But that's so perfectly Phoebe.
Exactly. That's what I mean, is they wrote it in.
I think it's perfectly in character.
Yeah.
She's a very giving person.
Yeah.
And does things her own way. Yeah. And they totally worked with the... We know that being your brother's surrogate is slightly different to being someone else's surrogate. But...
We're going to write it in.
We're running with it.
Talking of Frasier... So you had the Roz situation, which I don't think there was a pregnancy there in real life. It was a storyline that they went with.
I have no idea.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But the one that was a real life one was when Daphne... Oh my god, I can't remember her name. Not Peri Gilpin, that's Roz.
Yeah.
Crumbs. What's her name? Spandau Ballet's left wing. Oh, Spandau Ballet's dancing partner. Oh, what's her name?
Spandau Ballet's dancing partner.
I can't remember.
Jane Leaves?
That's it, yes.
Spandau Ballet's dancing partner was Jane Leaves.
She was a ballet...
She was a ballet dancer in real life.
There we go. So
I don't think Spandau had anything to do with it.
You can see my connection. You can see where I was going from. So Jane Leaves was pregnant in real life. So they decided to write in not a pregnancy storyline. They went down the route of...
A weight gain.
A weight gain.
Yes.
And...
I just chimed in before you said anything that phrasing that maybe wouldn't be.
You could see that correct. I was about to use the F word because the male characters in the show fat shamed a lot.
Oh my god!
During this period,
it was awful.
Almost all of the comedy was derived from fat shaming and hiding food
and how big she was getting.
It feels really, and it must have been very odd for her because she was tiny, like she was a ballerina. It just felt like such the wrong way of...
Well, I don't like the way that they did the fat shaming, don't get me wrong. What I do quite like as a result of this so this came at the point where Daphne and Niles, spoilers, got together finally, and
after years of stalking
and weirdness, but what they used was her weight gain storyline was a way of her coping with trying to be this perfect girlfriend that Niles had imagined, the goddess that he'd been worshipping all those years, and how she felt she couldn't live up to it. She had like imposter syndrome going on, and how once they overcame that, stronger they were in a relationship to move on. I liked that particular aspect. I feel like there was a lot we didn't need to go through to get there.
They just didn't need the consistent fat shaming. They could have, but yeah, I agree with you there that the taking it away from an obsessive relationship and having her confront him and then work together to bring a new dimension to the relationship. I think, unfortunately, they had to go through a lot before it. But yes, I agree with you that was a creative way to build that relationship. Because I actually think if they hadn't done, it would have had to have...
They wouldn't have been able to continue that relationship storyline at all. It
was so insipid.
Insipid, yeah.
You look back on it and you kind of go, why were we laughing at this obsession? This married man smelling the hair. Like, it's really odd when you look at it, when you look back at it.
And, like, eyeballing her every time she turns around.
Yeah.
It's gross. It's really gross, actually.
But it's a really clever way. I think the other key one for pregnancy, of pushing a storyline in a totally different way, would be Dana Scully.
Ah, of course, in the X-Files.
Yeah, because that was not on the...
What is that show about? I've never seen it.
But that was not on the radar, that route. They wrote that whole thing, which has presided over the entire series. It
completely changed the series and introduced a whole new way of that kind of storytelling, of having that massive arc that went on for years.
Still
going continuing, actually,
into season 11 and whatever happens afterwards.
Hopefully nothing. But yeah, so using the so they use overcoats and stuff to ignore the pregnancy, but used the leave that she needed to take in order to give birth. Might I point out, 2 weeks leave. 2 weeks leave for having a baby. I cannot get over that. Anyway, use that to sort of to take on this abduction arc and completely change the whole show into something far more personally driven for the two of them. And it completely changed their relationship as the two leads as well. I really like the way that they did that. I like the story idea in that and how it influenced things. I don't like the way they did it.
The creative manoeuvring around a real life situation is clever. Unfortunately, as we pointed out with the other things, they can maybe go down some wrong routes for
And obviously, we can't obviously say what would have happened if she had not been pregnant. They hadn't had to sort of think about how they're going to write her out of the show for an episode and a half.
Really long time.
Never going to get over it. But would the show have lasted as long without that overarching mythology? Because everyone was watching to try and find out what the fuck is going on.
It totally changed the show, which is a good thing.
It wasn't a bad show before, but it just didn't have the longevity necessarily in it.
But I think it's looking at that type of thing, and aside from pregnancy and death and other situations like that, politics is going to play a key role in the impact of real life events impacting shows. We know that House of Cards was affected by the Trump era, going from Obama era. We know that the West Wing had a lot of impact from real life politics with Bush era and all of that stuff, coming off the back of that, because you're having to be inspired by real life events, especially when sometimes they're more outrageous than what you were writing on a fictionalized TV show.
Well, yeah, it's like writing, because especially, I don't think it's quite so common now, but when there was a 24-episode season as standard, quite often you were writing whilst the show was on.
Exactly.
And so something like The West Wing, it's almost like having to... It's like the week with John Oliver or something.
Yeah.
That's a tough thing to do, don't get me wrong. But they're also trying to create a whole narrative and arc amongst all of that keeping up with what's going on thing.
10-15 characters rather than just a monologue,
and risking things actually sounding hideously out of date.
Like look at what like when South Park got into that writing style, which was
satirising the weekly events.
Literally they got so good at the production that they could start writing on a Wednesday to air on a Tuesday. So throughout the kind of Trump and Hillary stuff, they were literally, and with the whole Obama getting in, they were doing that the week it happened. Actually airing something.
I don't know how people can get their thoughts in order that quickly.
It's amazing in terms of being inspired by real life events. But as you say, it does date the show. You can't go back and watch it in the same way as those early episodes, which are quite timeless, that you can just pick up on an early South Park episode because it's just the character interacting. It became so reliant on what the trending topic was of that week that actually a lot of the episodes feel a bit outdated sometimes when you watch them, because ideas and policies and stuff change. Like it's.
Well, yeah, we maybe overcome one hurdle and another bigger one comes along.
Well, if we're looking at like politics and trends and stuff like that, one of the big things that has impacted film and TV alike was 9/11. Like that changed the production and the writing and the scripts and everything for countless projects.
Absolutely.
Because the
world felt like a different place, didn't it?
Either the world felt like a different place, either they were situated in New York. You know, the amount of films and stuff that had to be rewritten and reshot and stuff because of being situated in New York.
Yeah.
And then you had Friends, which I only found out about recently, which had an episode that was due to air the October of like
the following month,
2 or 3
9/11.
weeks after 9/11, where Chandler and Monica were going on their honeymoon, and Chandler makes a bomb joke. You know, so it was written and shot well before any of this happened, but they had to then go back, and it actually changed the outcome of the season. So it was, you know, when they were doing the one-upmanship with the other couple who were constantly getting upgraded.
Yeah, the newlyweds who get all the free shit.
They then, but the original scene was Chandler makes a joke about bombs, so they had to go back and reshoot and rewrite that.
So they get what do you mean? So how does that change the arc? Like
because they didn't go on holiday, they were detained.
They didn't get their honeymoon.
They came straight back to the apartment. So some of the jokes that were made throughout that season, which were about the honeymoon, it changes it. It's crazy.
It's interesting that one change. Now, the severity of 9/11 aside here, obviously, but that change established this whole thing of Monica and Chandler being weird as a couple and when meeting other couples, how they handled that.
Yeah.
Which I think is it's interesting because that's then actually picked up in How I Met Your Mother and carried by Marshall and Lily as well. This whole kind of like couples who struggle to find couple friends. But yeah, without that change, it does completely change their characters and their arc and stuff.
Yeah, and just why the decision to take it on such a different route is really interesting, because they could have still been detained for a different reason, but
I don't think anybody really wanted to see airports and anything to do with planes on their screens at that point.
Yeah, especially not around that.
And I remember that episode was dedicated to the victims.
Yes. So again, there's ways of taking any obstacle and having either a reverence for it, so if it is a tragedy like 9/11, the death of Carrie Fisher, you can have that reverence for it. You can have the joy of the pregnancy and stuff, so you can write that in so that it lifts the character. It takes the character on a new journey, and you can get rid of baggage in the form of like Kevin Spacey and stuff like that, and hopefully push the show into, you know, what that show needs to become right now, which is the show was about a fucking horrific, narcissistic
person's ascent
who trampled on women and killed women countless times, and relationship with prostitutes and stuff like that. We're now taking it into a different route of, you know, and how can the writers use that as a way of not paying respect to Kevin Spacey, but paying respect to those he's fucked on. And yeah, I think it's a really interesting position for that show to be in.
Oh no, because I feel like the setup for that, really what they've been, not set up for that, but one of the themes that have been coming through, especially in the last season, was that Claire, Robin Wright's character, is gradually becoming more like him.
I know, but I never liked that.
So we need some kind of pathos.
I think we need some kind of pathos, or for her to have that realisation and change, you know, make a concerted effort to change. Because when she killed, it took the show down. It took the show down a huge notch. Yeah. So I'll be interested to see now that it's become her show,
how they're running with that.
Maybe that they can push that in a less.
Or maybe the overarching part of that, you know, the theme of the show is that power corrupts.
Power corrupts, yeah, that is.
But yeah, anyway, so looping this back round to Star Wars.
As everything does.
Everything starts with Star Wars. I mean, it's
our podcast started with Star Wars.
It sure did.
Way back.
Yeah, I think my hope is that they in some way honour Carrie Fisher's role in this franchise and everything that she's done for this. Like, she's been a huge part of the Star Wars world for so long and totally embraced it and understood how, you know, that role that she played. So yeah, I just hope that there's a even a doff of the hat or something, and it's not kind of just glossed over and disregarded, because that would be really sad. That's my hope for this.
I have a lot of hope. You know, Force Awakens opens, and one of the first lines is about General Organa, and then Max von Sydow says, I know her as, was it I know her as royalty or something like that.
Yeah, she was always a princess to me.
You know, I know, yeah. And so very early on, there was this respect and love established for that character, and so I've got hopes that they're going to really push the story forward with reverence for her.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be all about her, but there has to be some kind of reference.
Because she wouldn't have wanted that. She wouldn't have wanted a nostalgia trip, you know, of that. She would want the franchise to keep going, because she did. She hated it for a while, and then she embraced it and loved it. And as fans, we want that respect to go both ways.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out next December 2019.
So far off.
It is. I mean, rumour has it it's being shot down the road from here. But then all we know is that it's being shot in the UK, so I guess every neighbourhood in the country is going, it's being shot down the road, as a rumour.
Feels like everything's being shot in the UK.
No, everything's being shot in Atlanta. Fact. Great. Well, I think we've kind of looked at a lot of the different ways people have handled this. The ones, some are more successful than others, so we won't hold bated breath.
Bated breath. That. No,
it's a horrible phrase. I hate that.
We're really looking forward to it.
Let's find out what happens. Let's see what they do.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.